right, ladies and gentlemen, and the two dogs in attendance. Three. Good morning. Morning. Welcome to the Coffee Club stage. We are all here. Kit is about to get up, and I will be interested to hear what he's going to say because he's going to be talking about how to keep electricity in your van. So I will be definitely interested in that because I always seem to be running a little bit low myself on electricity. But yeah, so without further ado, let's learn some stuff. Here we go. Here's Kit. Yay.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hope you're enjoying the shade. Make the most of it for today, I reckon. Yeah, my name's Kit. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And it's ironic, as I was told, because Kit sells kits. That's how this works. I started and still run a business called eDub. eDub Services is the official name of the business, but it covers a whole load of things which we're going to touch on today. I've got about a 45-minute slot, I'll be perfectly honest, because eDub covers so many different things and I have no idea what your personal preferences are. I'm going to probably rabbit on for about 20 minutes or so. And then if you've got any questions, then we're just going to open the floor and I'll fill in any specific blanks that I feel that you might want to know a little bit extra about. So eDub is a company that is passionate about enabling everybody to experience electric classic cars and campervans. Now, what that means is effectively you're taking a classic vehicle, in our case it's majority of classic VW campervans, and it's basically an engine swap. So you're removing the engine, sometimes, most of the time, the gearbox as well, and you're electrifying it. So you're giving it an electric motor, you're giving it a pretty large battery pack, and making it on its interiors like a modern electric vehicle. And obviously on the exterior, you're still keeping the iconic classic look and feel of the vehicle. It came from, so the origin story came from, it was 12 years ago, about a weather similar to this, 12 years ago. And it was on a bit of a road trip with my mum and my wife in the back of the car. And my mum is a senior lecturer at Teesside University in electric vehicle stuff. I can't remember the exact thing. It's something to do with battery life. So it's all about the how to make batteries last as long as possible. So we were having just a conversation about, we were passionate about VWs and about how people would engine swap them. So we were familiar with a little bit of people swapping in like Subaru engines and Porsche engines into VWs to get more performance out of it. So then the kind of concept came into our brains of, well, if you can swap in an engine, why can't you swap in an electric motor? And the ironic response was, well, how hard can it be? And the rest is history. So we set out on a journey to kind of prove that concept of, well, how hard can it be? What's actually involved in doing that process? At the time, the Nissan Leaf was probably the most popular electric vehicle commercially, and that was just starting to be available in the UK. So charge points were not really appearing, and electric vehicles were being sent out in little kind of pockets all over the place. And we did a bit of research and we found out that basically no one was really doing it. There were a couple of things you could YouTube and you could find some DIY enthusiasts that were trying their best, but no one was really creating electric classic vehicles that could be used quite straightforward by a lot of people, as opposed to the tinkerers that just wanted to do it to prove a point. So we set out on a journey to do it, but not just to achieve it, but to make it as simple as possible for anybody else to jump in. The idea of the business, of course, as you can see from our vehicle, so our Indy, our first eDub, is over the far side of the trade centre. You can't miss her. She's bright green, right over the far corner. Come and have a look and have a nosy around her. She's our eDub, and she was specifically imported. She was brought into the UK. She's an American VW originally, and then she was converted specifically to be electric powered. We did all of the restoration work as well, so she was built from the ground up to be exactly what you see before you, and it's to be as straightforward and as user-friendly as possible. And the idea of the business was it wasn't just for a jolly, it was something to do where we could get a return on investment as quickly as possible, which was to do it as a hire business. So it was, let's convert a campervan, let's get it out on the road, let's let as many people as possible experience it. And that kind of mantra still goes today. So eDub itself has grown quite rapidly into more of a conversion specialist. So most of the work that we do, we have a workshop. We're based just in Great Ousburn. So if you're familiar with the area, it's the other side of York from here. That's where we're based. And from there, we hire out Indy for hires, and we also do conversions in that workshop as well. At the moment, we've got too many to count. I've got about 6 VW campervans in the workshop being converted. We've got 3 more outside waiting. We've got a few with a restoration company that we deal with who are going through restorations. We also do a handful of other classic vehicles. So we've got a couple of Porsche 911s in there and a Morris Minor, things like that. If you're interested in the conversions angle, I do have a couple of flyers with me. Those are not the ones that I've given out. So if you are really passionate about the conversions angle, then please come and grab me afterwards, because I'm going to try and keep mostly on the trips topic for today. So when we set out to convert Indy to electric, we set out to go, okay, what are the main building blocks for an electric conversion? So you're changing the engine, and instead providing something to give propulsion. That was an electric motor. And the only real company that was making electric motors powerful enough off the shelf in individual units. So you can't really go and knock on the door of Nissan and say, hey, can I have a few motors, please? We did try that. And it kind of worked at some stage, but not in 2013 when we started. So there was a company over in the States, or a couple of companies that had paired up, and they had created motors that were, and it was a voltage problem. So there were lots of motors that were available that were quite low voltage by comparison, so 48 volts around that area. But there was a company that had taken those motors and had built them up into something a lot more significant. So the highest voltage they were going to was 144 volts, which at the time was a big deal for something that you could just buy off the shelf as a single unit without being an OEM or a big kind of car manufacturer. So that company was called HBVS, and they partnered with a controller company called Curtis and let you buy a motor and a controller, which is an inverter as well, off the shelf that you could then just power with battery power and power a vehicle. At the same time, a lot of DIY enthusiasts were creating kind of conversion systems for classic vehicles. So you would find companies that would make an adapter plate that would connect the motor to a particular gearbox. So yeah, Indy, our green campervan available for hire, is a manual transmission, which is a bit weird for an electric vehicle. If you've driven an electric vehicle already, you'll know that that's not normal at all. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but ultimately you've still got the original gearbox, and all that's doing is giving you the same kind of ratios that you would have had originally to get the power from the electric motor into your wheels. In practice, what that means is that you can drive either all the time in third gear. You can literally just leave it in third gear and it's a static connection. You've got no idling, so there's no stalling. You just put your foot down like a go-kart and off you go, or you can stop. But because of the power of the motor that we have in Indy, it's better to use the gears. It's more economic to use the gears. You do get more range by using the different gears. So using a bit of second, a bit of third gear to get around. Indy also has the fun feature where she's got a little turbo switch. It's actually an eco switch, but I've renamed it because it's more fun to think of it like a turbo switch than it is to have an eco switch. So most of the time, again, you can drive around in eco mode, which is about 70% of the power available. But every now and then, either because you need to overtake, or you want to scare someone at traffic lights, or you're just maybe can't quite change the gear as quickly as you'd like to, you can just flick a little switch on the dashboard and it instantly gives you 30% more power. So you can just get a little zip round and round corners or up hills, things like that, which is really, really smart. So Indy also has a couple of other design features that makes her really unique. One of the big things that we found as a challenge really early on when we started, and again, if some of you are familiar with electric vehicles, and it's still a bit of an issue today, is the charging network. So the public charging network is, in my opinion, still not good enough commercially. That is something that needs to improve, and thankfully it is improving. So it's not like everyone's just stopped and said, we're done. It is constantly improving, which is really, really great. But at the time in 2013, or when we eventually got Indy on the road in 2015, charging was always a big question mark. And it wasn't just about, is there enough chargers? Where is she going to charge? What's going to happen? But it was also about how people would understand what charging was who had never driven electric, who had never driven classic vehicles, and were suddenly thrown into this world of saying, I really want to do this, but I don't want to have to learn all these crazy things about how to charge and what to do about it. And it was all a bit clunky. So we designed a system built into Indy, which means that she can charge from the campsite, which you've booked to stay at when you're hiring her. So traditionally, a lot of electric vehicles will have it's called like a granny cable. It's something that you would plug into the vehicle and plug into just a home electrical socket. Most electric vehicles have something like that, either with the car or available to purchase additionally. And having that feature, the main problem with it is that I'm going to get a bit techie. If you like that, great. If not, just switch off for a second. The main issue with that is that it charges about 13 amps. Most campsites are 10 plus. So you have a bit of a danger where if you just if you took your Nissan Leaf or your Tesla to a campsite and tried to plug in, you get told off for one. You'd probably trip the system and you'd turn off everyone's electric all around you as well. So you won't be the most popular camper if you tried to do that. And a lot of campsites are becoming wise to that as well, which is good because they should. We actually had a hirer who borrowed Indy, who's been designed to charge at campsites, but took their Tesla alongside it. And the campsite owner called me up and said, "You realise that your hirer is charging your van and a Tesla from a home splitter that he's made and plugged in?" I thought, oh my goodness, getting a really bad name for myself and for them. Thankfully, that didn't cause too many massive issues. But Indy herself has a system built in where she actually charges around 8 or 9 amps built into the system. Because if you think about it, electricity is everywhere. It is everywhere you need to go. And so the difficulty isn't so much where to find electricity. The difficulty is how do you get access to it safely and to get access to it in a kind of straightforward and a logical way. So we're figuring, well, if you've hired Indy, you're going to arrive at the campsite at about tea time, about 6 o'clock, maybe depending on where you're going. And then you're going to plug in straight away, just like every single other motorhome. And she won't pull any more power than a regular motorhome's electric heater or something like that. So it's really low power. And that's what we have to say to campsite owners. They say it's not a problem, it's absolutely fine. We even say to campsite owners who contact us, if they have any issue, even though the cost is negligible, if they do have an issue with costs of electricity, then we foot the bill. So eDub, the company, pays for the electricity bill for those campsites. Nobody's ever taken us up on it. But we try and kind of smooth out those frictions for clients who are taking our campervan away to hire. And then you're obviously sleeping in the camper, so all that time it's kind of slow charging overnight, and then you'll wake up in the morning. You're not going to be off at crack of dawn. You're going to get up and maybe have a lazy breakfast, and by 8, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning, you're fully charged. Absolutely no problem. And that's been really straightforward for a lot of our hirers. So we found actually this summer marks 10 years of Indy being available to hire on the road, which is really significant. So she was first kind of road driven on the 4th of July in 2015. And throughout these last 10 years, we haven't had anybody have any issues with these kind of friction points that we anticipated. We haven't had anyone being turned away from a campsite or have an angry letter or have a campsite owner getting really frustrated. Almost quite the opposite. So many campsite owners and so many other campers, of course, are just so fascinated, and they love to see the vehicle back up and back on the road and being used in a really, really fun way. So charging is not an issue at all. Indy can still charge from what's called, it's hard to get the terminology. 7 kilowatts is the number. Some places call it fast, some places call it medium. It's hard to know the difference. But it's a type 2 socket. So it's not rapid or ultra rapid or super fast or whatever you've seen the terminology as. It's charging from kind of an amplified regular 3-phase electric hookup. So you'll find those in loads of public. So many of those places are popping up at tourist destination locations, which again is absolutely perfect for what Indy was built to accomplish. So you would hire Indy, you'd obviously charge overnight, but maybe you'd go out for a day trip and you'd go to Fountains Abbey up near Ripon, and they have 7 kilowatt chargers. So while you're there, you're going to be there for 4 or 5 hours. So you might as well plug in. You get great parking by doing that because you're right next to the visitor centre. You're not at the back end of the car park. You get great parking. You're charging. It's either free or it's very negligible. And again, we will reimburse that cost as a company. So we don't want anyone to feel a friction by that. And then you can carry on your way. When you come back to the vehicle, it's fully charged. So it's all about, I once heard someone describe it as an ABC, always be charging. Every opportunity you've got, if you're stopping somewhere, if you're just grabbing a coffee, if you're spending the day somewhere, try and find somewhere with electric chargers. And there are so many. And if you don't find someone, then tell us or write them a very polite email. Why haven't you thought of this? There's still so many places that it just baffles me that they don't have any kind of charging in a humongous car park. So Indy herself she's available to hire. The costs are around £150 per night. Remember, you're immediately saving on fuel costs on that. There's no fuel costs at all. So you pick her up at 100%, you can bring her back on 0. You can't do that unless you roll in. You bring her back as low as you want. There's and we'll pay all your refueling costs if you get them. That's our offer to you. I've given some of you out some flyers as well. If you didn't get one, come grab me afterwards. There's a 15% voucher on that flyer, so make good use of that. It's got limited time scale on it, or if you know someone who might be really interested, get it to them really quick because it expires next Friday. But yeah, Indy herself, like I said, she was completely built from the ground up to be really straightforward to hire. And so she's got really great functions like she has, if you come over and see, people love this more than anything else. She has what's called a flip and sit front seat. So that's a full bench seat along the front, but the back of the seat actually flips round to face the direction. So when you're parked up and camping, like we are right now, you can flip the seat round and then you can have facing each other, like two sofas facing each other. And it's really great. My favorite place to sit is kind of legs up on that sofa, kind of tucked into the corner. It's my favorite place. And you've got space, you can put your coffee down and get to that space. People love it. And the alternative is in a T2, normally you might have seen like a buddy seat, you'll get like a square on the floor. That's fine, but it does take up a lot of space. So we always thought, actually, we want people to be able to take Indy away practically with families, larger groups of people as opposed to just ones or twos. So we tried to, all that floor space is clear with that seat, which makes a really good option. The pop top as well. So Indy has a full length pop top, which is quite unusual. I actually don't know what it's called. So if someone wants to tell me the exact brand of it, I honestly don't know. But what that means is that you can get a 6 foot long bed in the top and 6 foot long bed in the bottom. So you can actually sleep 4 adults in Indy. So when I go away with my family, it's normally me and my daughter, my 8-year-old, who sleep in the top, and my wife and my son, my 5-year-old, who sleep downstairs. That's just how we do it. But it's really comfy and there's loads of extra space. And again, that opens up to loads more people to be able to, as we said before, experience electric classic campers. So be able to not feel any boundaries, to actually just give it a go, just try it out, have an adventure. The other thing that loads of people say to us is when they're taking Indy away, they come to our location in Great Ousburn. We are really thorough with the kind of handover process. So before we started the hire process, we did a bit of market research. We hired from a company that we found who did campervan hires. We were like, what does this look like? Let's just see what the whole process is. How does it work? And they kind of gave us some keys, pointed at a couple of things, and then said, bye. And we kind of we had no idea. And I think at the time, it was like parallel parks down the backside street as well. It was absolutely terrifying. We were just waved away. And I remember leaving that experience and feeling like I just didn't feel like I was fully in control and I really knew what was going on. So instead, we always made a big deal to go, right, we're going to go kind of the other extreme. So we've got kind of online tutorials, we've got user guides, and then when you come and collect, we will slightly over bombard you with just everything that you need to know. There's a user guide in the vehicle as well. Any problems at all, we've got an eDub hire manager who's on call 24/7. So you've got a kind of WhatsApp number where you can get hold of Daisy, who's our eDub hire manager, with any questions that you've got. So we wanted people to feel like they're really in control, because we know that pretty much all of our previous clients have either never driven a classic camper or never driven electric, or both. It's quite normal for people to come up and they always feel a bit nervous. They're like, I've just never driven a classic. It's like, great, you're like everybody else who's come to find out about this experience. So we want people to feel as comfortable as possible as they take her away. And what they say to us is, yeah, for the first kind of mile or two as they're driving away, they feel like, oh my goodness, what is going on? But they say once they've had that first mile or so, they're in the groove. They know what they're doing. They're fully comfortable, and they're just feeling the vibes, the cool vibes. They're absolutely loving it. And the kind of glowing reviews that we get off the back of it. So again, there's so many times where I've kind of sent people away in the camper and I've felt a bit nervous. I've gone, oh dear, are they really going to be okay? Are they going to be fine? And then they come back and it's 5-star reviews. And I'm just like, oh, fantastic. People just love it. They really, really enjoy it. So I encourage you, if you're kind of on the fence thinking about it, then come and have a look. Maybe just give it a go. It's really good fun. So, how long have I gone for? Roughly about 20 minutes or so. So, okie dokie. What I'm thinking is, I wanted to just do a quick show of hands, I think, just so I can understand a bit more about what the space is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the floor to ask a couple of questions. I'll fire them back at you, and then we can go from there. But I'm curious. You are probably one of 3 people who I'm talking to this morning. One type of person would be somebody who is curious about hiring Indy or hiring an electric classic campervan. Some of you might be curious about doing something similar yourselves. Some of you might be thinking about, I've always thought about doing it kind of DIY myself. And some of you might be thinking about actually getting a conversion for yourselves as well. So talking to me about the conversion side of the business as well. So quick show of hands. So the first one, anyone roughly interested in hiring indie, just on the fence, maybe thinking about it? Perfect. Anyone thinking about doing their own conversion? This is fantastic. Yes, okay, perfect. Anyone just really interested in learning more about the conversion process? Yeah, yeah, brilliant. Okay, fantastic. So that gives me a really great idea of where we're going to go with this. Okay, so I'm going to open the floor. If you want to stick your hand up and then shout me your question, and I'll repeat it down the microphone for everyone to hear. Go for it, sir. So, any problems with overloading the suspension? Very good question. So, no is the short answer. I'm just thinking how to answer the question because there's 4 or 5 different ways. Yeah, the answer is no. So, thankfully, VW campers were designed to carry a lot of weight. That's what they were built for. So traditionally, originally, the split screen camper was a ton curb weight to carry a ton. That was its marketing spiel before it became a campervan. And the T2s kind of carried that on. So first of all, there's obviously axle weights front to back, and we are making sure that everything that we do from a conversion perspective is still within those axle weights. That obviously makes a big difference to safety, so practical things like suspension, but it also means the DVLA aren't going to have a hissy. Because again, when you go through categorizing your vehicle, so you do, the trigger process is eventually you'll have to tax your vehicle, as everybody does, classic vehicle, you have to tax it, even if it's 0. So you do that process online, and there's a box that says, has your vehicle had any significant modifications? Now, an engine swap counts. Whether you're doing it an electric conversion or whether you're putting a Subaru engine in, you have to tick that box. And what they say is, right, we need to make sure you've done this properly and you haven't completely butchered the back end of your vehicle and hidden it from us. The DVLA have changed the rules over the last few years quite a few times. Our process at eDub is we always try and stay one step ahead of that. The DVLA is actually quite rubbish at checking vehicles, which is good and bad, depending on how you want to look at it. Compared to more extreme countries like mainland Europe, Germany specifically. So Germany have a very strict policy for any modifications in a vehicle. France have an even stricter policy to the point where you just can't really do it. It's really difficult to do it in France. But we build our conversions almost to as much of that level as possible, which means that, so it unfortunately means that we still have to have an inspection. So the DVLA still sends somebody every couple of weeks to come and look at one of our conversions, take a few pictures, tick some boxes on their checkboard, on their notepad, and that's the end of it, and they move on. The other side to it, though, obviously from a safety perspective, quite a lot of our vehicles that we get from clients don't have great suspension or brakes. So it's one of those things where we kind of go, look, you're bringing this vehicle to us. This is a big investment. There's a lot going on with this vehicle. Should we just take a look at some of these quite basic things and make sure that it's all working fine? So brake check over is just something we'll take care of because you might as well. You're putting more power into it. Let's make sure it can stop. It's quite straightforward. What we do with the suspension is, especially on the more compact split screen vehicles, there's very limited space for movement in that rear end when you've put in our entire conversion systems. And so we put in coilover shocks on the rear just to minimize that bounce. And again, it's not going over the axle weight. It's just like, it does add about, I think it adds about 170, 180 kilos to the rear weight, which is still well within the weight limit, but it would be like driving with a full boot full of luggage and a few children thrown in for good measure. And so we just, one of those things that we do or we recommend is we put coilover shocks on there because it just helps to firm up that back end and stops it from springing all over the place. Anything else? Is that all good? Real. So it does vary massively. Some of them have got quite extravagant interiors, some of them don't. So I think the latest one we did was about 1650, 1700. But the T2s, of course, have got a weight limit of 21, 2200. So there's a lot of wiggle space in there. Yeah, of course. Okay, yes, sir.
Would the still be tax exempt and MOT exempt once you put the electric motor? Or do you then go into having to take it for an MOT every year?
Great question. So the question was, Is it still tax exempt? Is it still MOT exempt once it's gone through the process? At the moment, the DVLA have just changed the rules with this inspection process that I was talking to before. That, at least to start with, it formally needs an MOT to have all of those boxes ticked. We don't know yet whether that means it just is now in a new category, and that's absolutely fine. And it's still, because it still keeps its original registration. So because of the method of what we do, it's a point system, is the way the DVLA do it. And there are a certain number of points that you can change on a vehicle before it needs to be re-registered or given a Q plate, and we stay a million miles away from that as much as possible. The big ones is making holes in bodywork and chassis. So drilling, welding, cutting, anything to do with the chassis, we do not do. We stay a million miles away from that. So when you take an engine and a gearbox out, you're left with some nice big bolts that were there, and so we reuse those bolts and holes to connect our systems on. Again, we've got some flyers here if you want to see some pictures of what that looks like in the T2s. And we do that with all our conversions. So everything is mounting onto original bolt holes so that nobody can come along and point a finger and say, you've made a new hole there. There have been some horrible stories of conversion companies where I think there was a Mini Cooper a couple of years ago, and they drilled a couple of holes in the petrol tank shelf just to P-clip some wires underneath it, and they failed because they were, well, a Mini is slightly different because it's a monocoque chassis. So that was modified slightly. But yeah, so what we don't know yet is whether that's going to turn into a continuous yearly thing. My thoughts are an MOT is not always a dreadful idea on a decent camper. I think if you're spending that amount of money on a really nice camper, it's kind of a good idea to make sure it stops and the seatbelts are working and things like that. What we actually offer as part of our service, we're not MOT qualified, we're not that side of things, but we offer as part of our conversions is a free annual service for the vehicles once they've been converted. So if you would quite like to have those kind of things checked up on, then we can take care of that for our clients and go through it. But yeah, in terms of what happens then is you get a new V5 is what's issued. Your reg is still the same. Your year of manufacture is still the same. So it's still classic because you just bolted something extra onto it. So your value of the vehicle is exactly the same as it was, which is another big deal. Because effectively, there are lots of collectors that are like, I'm really interested in this, but I kind of want to know that I could take it out again and put my engine back in. The answer is yes, with an eDub conversion. But what happens is your new V5 arrives, and all it says is instead of petrol, it says electric on it. But I don't know yet. I'll find out in a year whether that means that it turned into an ongoing tax thing. It's the tax I don't know. We'll find out. But yeah, the MOT is then they'll be tied together, I assume. In my opinion, MOT is not a dreadful idea. Does that make sense? Perfect. Okay, anyone else?
So what you talked about charging. So the average person, what is the charge right? How many miles do you get out of the charge? If they've never driven it,
Perfect. Yeah, the question was about range, I suppose, isn't it? Range per charge. It depends on the size of your battery pack is the ultimate question, and also depends on the vehicle. So we're talking about campers specifically, not, I won't go into Porsches, things like that. They do. A lot of it comes down to aerodynamics as well as the size of the battery pack. So a VW campervan is already as aerodynamic as a brick, which means efficiently it doesn't make much difference, which is actually quite nice because you know what range you're going to get, and it's not fantastic compared to a brand new OEM. But we all know, if you've seen the adverts for brand new electric vehicles, they're boasting about ranges that you'll never get, which is just frustrating. We have a number of different conversion systems that we fit into our campers. Our campers get between 2.6 and 2.8 kilowatt hours per mile. And our packs go from 37 kilowatt hours up to 62 kilowatt hours. So what that means is maximum you're getting about 175 miles per charge in our biggest conversion systems. You can get bigger packs, but it becomes like the calculation of cost versus weight versus range stops making sense. And as I said before, VWs have got an unusually high payload, so they can cope with big battery packs. You could go to an 81 kilowatt hour battery pack, but then you couldn't carry any luggage. It would just be you, and you wouldn't have anything in the vehicle because otherwise you're over the weight limit. And then obviously your charge time is different as well. So on our new conversions, we fit rapid charging, CCS rapid charging, and all those systems. We've developed our own CCS rapid charging system here at eDub HQ, and that allows you to charge in 70 kilowatts, which is about half an hour, 45 minutes. So from experience, like driving a classic camper is fun, but after 2.5 hours, like you just need to stretch your legs. So, so that amount of time is perfect actually. And you get into that boundary where actually, if you're around 100 miles, 110 miles range, which we do offer, we've got a couple of campers, which we've got a couple of London customers they're just going to potter around London. They don't need massive amounts of range. So they've gone for the smaller packs, and that's brilliant for them. But it means for me, it's like I need kind of 130 to feel comfortable if I'm doing long trips. So yeah, 170, 180 is perfect for me. How's that? Real. Say that again, sorry. Great question. Does that include putting the heating on in the vehicle? Kind of, yes. So again, because of the efficiency statement that I made earlier, they're already really inefficient. So they're already, 2.6 kilowatt hours per mile is pretty pants. It's pretty rubbish. Most electric vehicles will be getting between 3.7 or 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour. Obviously, there's a big difference. The biggest difference is actually speed. So it's pottering around either country roads or around towns or around cities versus motorway driving. There's something about like the most efficient speed you can travel is about 57 miles per hour. There's some general statistic. So motorway drive, anything over that and just the curve of efficiency just goes right down. So in our conversions, we have the option. So again, this is sometimes a big shock for people. They don't come with heating as standard because obviously your original heating came from a really inefficient block of mechanics in the back of the vehicle that would occasionally try and blow some heat up some tubes into your face, which never really worked. So heating isn't just something you get off the side of doing an electric conversion. So instead we fit heating systems and they look like little element bricks. They're 1 kilowatt element bricks with a fan on the back of it, and they get fitted hidden in the tube. So everything looks and feels the same, but it's instant high voltage heat. It's a funny thing to say. Blown where you want it, at your face, on your feet, on your windscreen. That makes a big difference. But they're actually quite low in consumption, especially once they get going. So we've got air conditioning systems as well. The air conditioning has a little spike of amps to get it started, and then it runs at 2 or 3 amps. It's really, really low on a 400-volt system. And the heater is about the same. It's about 5 amps per brick on the system. So it has a spike of about 25 amps on the 400-volt system when it first starts, and then it just levels out and it ticks itself over. It's normally as well like if you are needing the heating, it's also quite likely that it's raining or windy. And those make a big difference as well. And it's not always as straightforward as just I've got the heating on, therefore it's going to be shorter. But what we have found is that if you do a side-by-side comparison of an eDub with heating versus Hyundai Kona with heating, then the Hyundai is going to be much more affected because of the efficiency that it already had versus an eDub, which in practice just means you don't really have to worry about it unless you're really trying to go a silly distance or you're doing a strange YouTube video where you want to prove that you can do it. In that case, you're going to be squeaky bum. But does that make sense?
What motors you use?
So what motors am I using? That was the question, wasn't it? So in our modern conversions, I'll do a bit of a history first, that's all right, and then I'll say what we're doing right now. So we started with these enhanced golf cart, no they weren't, forklift motors that I mentioned right at the beginning. Then we moved on to Nissan. So we actually did have an opportunity where Nissan were offering the option to buy brand new motors from Nissan. The problem with that, they were perfect power. They were easily controlled. The problem was they were physically made for a front wheel drive vehicle, which didn't have any kind of chassis work over the wheels, which a VW has. The VW underneath the petrol tank has a chassis rail that goes up and over. And so the stack, as we called it, of the Nissan Leaf system, which was gearbox on the bottom, motor on the side, and then inverter, and then controller, didn't fit. So we had to dismantle it, rotate it, 3D print it, mount it around again, and it lasted about 2 years and then it broke. So we kind of then went to build another method. So we tried that and it was a great system of control, didn't fit. The next option was Tesla. So yes, Tesla motors. Tesla were the first motors that were available, which were really, really powerful. I mean, they're 270 brake horsepower, which is just silly. But they were perfectly designed. They were so compact, and they were designed for rear-wheel drive vehicles. The first electric vehicle, really, that became commercially available that had those in the back. But what's crucial is we weren't buying them from Tesla. So they were crashed Teslas. Now, there was a scenario where, because of the insurance setup, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's interesting. There was an insurance setup where, because nobody could repair a Tesla, if you got into a crash with a Tesla, it was more financially viable for the insurance company to just write it off than to try and get it repaired. It was quite ridiculous. So you ended up with thousands of Teslas that would get a little bump on the corner and the whole thing would be thrown away, which was absolutely crazy. Which was fine for us for a few years because we got to get these motors, and motors will last forever. Motors they won't wear down. Forever's a figurative. They'll last a very, very long time. It's the battery that runs down, but it's actually, we found with Tesla systems, it's actually the inverters that also do. There's just something strange about Tesla inverters. They just, for some reason, don't last as long as we'd like them to. Yeah. So the question there was, when we put the motor in, where do we put the batteries? Yeah. Yeah. So we've done a few different versions. So originally, Indy that's here has got the batteries under the back seat, just because that was a big space where you could put them. We didn't love that because it's meant we've had to custom make a seat and it gets in the way and it's not brilliantly efficient. When we did the Nissan Leaf one, we actually built a battery box and put it on the boot. We just built it and put it on the boot because it was an easy place to mount it. The next one we did was a full Tesla system. So that was Tesla motor and Tesla batteries. It was the only one we ever did with Tesla batteries. And in that one, we built two big boxes inside. So one under the seat, and then we built a cabinet behind the front seats. So it doesn't look like it, but underneath those two places are your battery modules. And that's okay, but it was just, again, really super complicated. Tesla modules are too big. So they're very efficient, but they're fiddly because they've got cooling built into them. So if they have a problem, they have a really big problem. You're not buying them new, so you're hoping that someone's removed them properly and diagnosed them properly. They're really sensitive. So when you are physically manhandling them I'm not a Tesla factory, so and that it just wasn't massively efficient. We now use NCM batteries. We get our batteries direct from China, and they're a kind of shoebox size module, and we assemble them into our own custom battery packs. And in our modern conversions, they do all sit in a custom battery box that sits where the engine used to be. So we're trying to keep all the weight in the same place that it originally was, and also trying not to encroach on the interior. So if you've got a perfect idea of your interiors, or you don't want to mess up what you've already got in there, an eDub conversion won't touch anything on the inside, which is quite a big deal. Which ones? Can I show you them afterwards? Is that all right? Rather than I've got a flyer here, and I'll talk you through the specifics of them. Nice one. Go for it. Just say the actual question part of it again. Did I hear of it? Was it?
Did you hear about the PVLA survey?
Yeah.
Where if you make a significant modification to a classic vehicle, i.e. even change an alternator, they were talking of losing the classic status of the vehicle.
So the statement was, heard of the classic status being removed of the vehicle. Yes. The other way it's sometimes called is historic status. That's another term that's been thrown around. When we first heard of these words, classic status, historic status, we originally were concerned that it was becoming an official classification. It would actually have a knock-on effect to what we were trying to do. Turns out it's not. So in terms of the actual approval process and how the IVA treat it, they have their own strict set of rules for conversions and alterations to vehicles. And that survey, I think, it sounds more like that was obviously the opinion of a lot of enthusiasts, which is absolutely fine. There is a place for enthusiasts to not want to change anything with their vehicle. I think they're fantastic. But there's also a place for what we do, where you've got alterations that are permissible that are still not destroying the vehicle, in my opinion. Everyone's going to have a different opinion on that. That's absolutely fine. But the way I understand it is, yes, there was a survey about it, but it all seemed to come from the perspective of this historical status, which almost needs to be. And when I've dug into this, because, again, slight tangent for a second, if you import a vehicle into the country and it's got no registration at all, which sometimes happens, or the VIN plate's disappeared, or something's gone really weird. We've got this with a split screen from Uruguay at the moment. You have to kind of prove that it is what it says it is. And the way the DVLA do that is they say you've got to get it recognized by a historic club. You've got to send it to a VW club, and you've got to get them to say, yeah, based on the information you've given us and all the pictures, we can verify that this is what you say it is, which is a VW T2, for example. It seems like it's tied in a little bit with that, is that there was this implication that those kind of feedback and that some of those clubs might not then classify it as historic, but it doesn't seem to have a knock on to the official documentation that goes with the vehicle. So it doesn't affect the V5 process, that none of that process is going, well, let me just check with the Historical Society. They don't. If you try and get historical status of it, if you got a conversion and you went to the German VW club and you said, right, can you just give this historical status, which is just a piece of paper really with a letterhead? They might say no. They might say yes. Does that mean anything to the physical vehicle? No. It may affect its value to certain sellers. I think it depends on the vehicle. What we found with VWs, as this festival is a bit of a testament to, is there's all flavors. There's all sorts of people that, some of them are really passionate about this kind of thing, some of them couldn't care less. And some people really, and I think my opinion is if you're really keen on the historic status of a VW T2, then I don't think you'd be coming to me for an electric conversion. Does that make sense? Real. Any more?
Additional solar panels on the cooking, lighting, fridge and things like that on the higher one.
Brilliant question. Well done. I won't do the round of applause because that's borderline patronising. No, but brilliant. Solar. So the question there was, do we put solar onto Indy? So yeah, something to specify actually. Indy is 100% electric. So that includes her interiors. There's no gas. There's no gas hob. It is an induction hob. Because of the nature of how Indy works, specifically, Indy has to be plugged into a campsite for the induction hob to work. So it's simply taking AC power from the campsite through a few cables into the hob, and it turns on and cooks your dinner, pours a kettle. We do have a solar panel on Indy, but a solar panel is only really used for a 12-volt system, which obviously an induction hob is not. It's a 240-volt system. You can obviously, as you'll know, and you can talk to Roma and the other guys over in the stands about getting 12-volt to 240-volt conversion systems. We've looked at them before and just felt that there's so many individual components. When you're already combining it with a full electrification system, there's just not quite enough space. You're taking up loads of cupboards with, inverters and extra big 12-volt or 24-volt battery packs to then do that conversion. And obviously, every time you're changing it, you're actually losing efficiency as well. So every time you're changing it from 12 volts into 24 volts into 240 volts, the efficiency isn't going brilliantly either. So there's definitely a place for it. What we've found is that actually the solar is really great for just keeping the 12-volt starter battery happy. So yes, our electric conversions still need a 12-volt starter battery. So they need a small, we replace it. So rather than the chunky lead acid battery, we replace it with a small lithium ion 12-volt battery. Because basically now an electric conversion just contains a load of little computers and they all need a little bit of power to switch on. And then once you switch them on, the main battery pack has something called a DC-DC converter, which is like a alternator that's taking your high voltage. So in Indy's case, that's 144. In our modern conversions, that's 400 volts, and it's taking that down to 12 volts to keep your 12-volt battery happy. But there are obviously times where if you're out and about, if you're doing a lot of, or if you've got like a 12-volt fridge, for example, I find that's perfect because actually the hotter the sun is, the colder you want your beer, surely. So actually in those scenarios, yeah, having a solar panel to do that job, brilliant. In terms of, I'm going to slightly answer a question you didn't ask, which is, could you do solar panel to actually recharge the main battery pack? That answer is no. So the efficiency of having a solar panel big enough and having there isn't yet a capability of taking a solar panel supply and putting it into the main traction battery pack. That just doesn't exist just yet. And the reality is you would need a day like today, you would need to have a roof that could be angled and you would need to rotate your van towards the sun all day. So you wouldn't just be able to sit there. And if you did that, you might get 30 miles range maximum. So I just feel like for the effort, just plug in like everyone else. Ideally, there are so many more places that are using static solar panels to charge a battery grid storage system to then charge your car. So the grid store, because the charging station's there all the time, that can sit there facing the sun and charge up a battery pack at the charging station that then puts that energy into the car. There's a lot more of those coming out, and they're quite cool. But in our modern conversions, just to finish the question, we do actually have an inverter that we fit into our systems that takes 400 volt from the main battery pack into 230 volt for a hob, for example. So in a lot of our more modern conversions, we bypass the 12 volts. So you would have gone 400, 12, 240. We bypass the 12, which goes straight from 400 to 240. So we have those systems that we build into our conversions. Everybody wants them because then we fit induction hobs. They can have 3-pin plugs. They can power all sorts of stuff. And they're really fun. They're really efficient. No worries. How are we looking? I'm happy to keep going. I think I've got an hour, don't I? No. That's why I keep telling me no. We've got time for one more.
Yeah, well, I can't see the other guy yet. So, yeah.
So do I keep going until the other guy turns up? No problem. One or two more. Go on. Oh. Yeah. 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 So our latest conversions start at about 60,000. They go up to 80 or 90,000 if you want all the bells and whistles. Most of our customers are coming to us with a restoration project as well. So every single I've got 6 campers at the moment, and 4 of them have all gone through bodywork restoration as well. So the total bill is coming out around 110, 120 for those. That's just to give you an idea of what people are doing. I will say comparatively, I know it might not sound like it, we are very cheap. Comparatively, if you try and find someone doing the same level of conversion anywhere else in the world, we are trying as hard as we can to keep the prices quite straightforward. You know, we're a very small team. We haven't got a ton of investors that we're paying off. We've built it all ourselves. We're doing a lot of the IP stuff ourselves. So you're getting a real personal service of what we do. But we're going to chat later anyway, and I'll give you the flyer and I'll tell you more about it. One more. Or not. I don't mind. Perfect. Right, I'll round up there. So I have some flyers here and I have some vouchers here. So please, if you didn't get one right at the beginning, just please wave at me and I will throw a voucher in your direction. That's a limited voucher for hiring Indy. It's available until Friday. If you're not going to use it, why not give it to someone that you love and care about, and hand that over. And then also, if you want to talk to me more about conversions, then I will just hang around and do that as well. Indy, like I said, is the far side of the trade pitch. You can't miss her. She's a bright green T2, and hopefully see some of you later on. Thank you very much.